Once again, please welcome Mike Clouden, CEO of the Milken Institute.
All right. I know that you're all anxious to hear the 40 minutes that I want to give you now about what we should do about California's problems, but I have an officious interloper who came here instead, so I'll cede my time to him. We really are delighted to welcome as our very special guest today, California's most distinguished and tireless public servant. Governor Brown really doesn't need any lengthy introduction, both because you all know his achievements and because they're really far too numerous to go through. He's had 3 terms so far as governor of California, the former Attorney General, former 2-term mayor of Oakland. In any office he has held, Jerry Brown has demonstrated that he's willing and often eager to shake things up in order to fight for Californians. We're honored to consider him a friend of the Institute. He's spoken at numerous Milken Institute public and private events, bringing us his insight as Oakland's mayor, as Attorney General, and as governor. And this is, in fact, the 11th appearance of Jerry Brown at a Milken Institute public event. We are delighted to have him here. He has often remarked to me that he's one of our best speakers because he's cheap. He doesn't even ask us to pay his airfare. It's truly a pleasure and an honor, so please join me in welcoming our Governor, Jerry Brown.
Well, many of you are paying far more than the airfare if you're earning enough to qualify for Proposition 30. So that money is coming in. But just think of it as something, we're subsidizing the Milken Institute because we come for free. Anyway, I'm glad to be here, have a chance to tell you about the state, how we're doing. In fact, I asked that a chart be put on the wall there, and I can just sit there and look at it, and I'll refer to it at some point. I think when we talk about, someone mentioned the problems of California, you'll hear about this, and taxes and regulation, unemployment and drought and all sorts of other things. I'd like to put it in a slightly bigger perspective. Around the time of the Civil War, Lincoln remarked that the real test of what the country was going through during that period was the ability, can we prove that popular government is not an absurdity? And that's a very kind of a memorable way to put it. Is popular government an absurdity? And at the time of the Civil War, it certainly looked like popular government wasn't working. But of course, with the conclusion of that and many generations subsequent, popular government has always been able to get through the crises of depression and war, and now we have debt and polarization and all sorts of issues. But at the end of the day, our whole premise is the people are in charge, and ultimately that is the power that we look to. Now in California, we have a very direct form of power, and that's called the popular initiative. And some people like it, some people don't. But I would want to just mention 5 measures that have helped California get out of a decade of financial difficulty and stress. First one, and by the way, these initiatives, some by Democrats, some by Republicans, some by rather liberal people, some by rather conservative people. But I just mentioned these 5 initiatives that passed, and the people of California, by their popular power, made the law of the state. First, reapportionment, to be done by a commission, independent commission, not by the political incumbents in Sacramento. That's the law of California. Term limits, another initiative came out of Southern California, as a matter of fact. The term limits the first time, and then term limits the second time, enabled legislators to say 12 years in one house, to develop more continuity, more expertise, I think. That was another, I think, popular initiative. Open primary, one that both political parties, Republicans and Democrats, all strongly opposed, but passed by the people. This means that a Democratic voter can vote for a Republican candidate in the primary and vice versa, Republicans voting for Democrats. Either way, it opens up the possibility that a legislator will not be the captive of the most zealous members of the party that he or she is registered in, because the primary is in effect a general election, and the top two then run off in November. Majority vote says that the budget can be enacted not by 2/3, but by a majority. That, by the way, has been the law in California for most of its history, with about a 20-year, 30-year hiatus. And then Proposition 30, which passed. And by the way, now it turns out we've had these big deficits. I never realized, when I ran for governor, first time, I thought the deficit in California was only $16 billion. I had said, how in the hell am I ever going to deal with that? And I ran knowing that I might not be able to deal with it, but I said, what the hell? I'm going to take a chance. And then I found out it was $27 billion. So that made it tough, $27 billion. So we cut, and we cut a lot. Cut popular programs. In fact, my advisors tell me, don't even mention what we cut. We cut child care. We cut the university 25%. We cut welfare. We cut aid. This is another one I shouldn't say, but I'll say it. We cut aid to the blind and disabled, $15 a month. We cut out redevelopment. We did some pretty tough things because we had to get, for 10 years, it was just going up and down. It's deficits, sometimes it looked good, sometimes it looked bad, but at the end of the day, the whole decade, we got deeper into trouble. And that's when they started talking about California as a failed state. So we got the cuts, and then we went to the people, and they voted for it. 45%, pretty solid. Colorado, the yes vote only got 35%. So now it turns out, according to the legislative analyst, we have billions of dollars in surplus. And so there will be a great effort to spend it as quickly as possible. Now, I put this chart on the wall so everybody can see. The surplus, to a important extent, is coming from capital gains. And we've measured over time what happens to capital gains. If you look at those peaks and you look at those valleys. So when you're at the peak, everybody says, let's spend it on permanent programs. And then you go down and you're in the valley. And now you're in big trouble, and it's time for a new governor to come in. And another governor gets in, and lo and behold, you're right up there at the peak again, and the same thing happens, and you get a new governor. So right now, I guess we're coming off that little peak there. It's looking good. We're not up to the high yet, but we're getting close. And the question is, when do we get the next valley? And the only way to avoid that is to put it in a rainy day fund, to say no when necessary, along with saying yes when that's appropriate. So that's going to be the test of popular government. And I hope my government is popular. Of course, it's not so easy to be popular if you want to level that little chart, because what it means is you have money. And at the top of this, by the way, it can be $7 billion. If you don't spend it quick enough, it can get to $12 billion. One time I had a budget on a $25 billion general fund. I had a surplus of about $5 billion. You think that was a good thing. But we had a treasurer in California, and you know what he called it? Obscene. He said it was obscene that government would ever have that much money. So then the corollary of that is always spend it, because if you have too much, then they're going to blame you for the obscene surplus. So that did happen. But don't worry, we've had a surplus like that, but it's always been temporary. But now we got to keep it even, and that's why I want that chart for people to really understand that money today doesn't mean money tomorrow. And this is, by the way, one consequence, in part, of Proposition 13. Proposition 13, the voters, I might say, in the most popular election, talk about the people, in 1978 in June, at that primary election, more people turned out than ever before or since in a statewide non-presidential primary. That is the high point, never reached. People were mad that they came out and they voted. I think it was like 65%, something like that. But then the vote was to cut property tax by 80%, 70%, some huge amount. Now then, how do you fund the schools? How do you fund fire and police? Well, then you had to shift to the state, and the state had that surplus, and then once we did that, we had to keep doing it. Well, what it means now is the income tax is now playing a much bigger role in the support of schools. 80% of the money for schools comes from the state, and the state, over 50% of the state's money comes in the income tax. So we've made property tax, which with rare exceptions, always goes up. Very stable, rarely goes down. Now we have that, and it's very variable. We have a second consequence, is that the money coming from the state, or what I like to call headquarters, a lot of the decision-making is going to come from headquarters. And now if you're at headquarters and you say we got 6 million kids and 330,000 teachers, how do we get them to do what we want? What are our tools? Well, your only tool is to send them messages, which you call laws and regulations, or maybe some money too. Prop 30 will send them some money. But we're sending them something like 10 volumes of the state education code. And I walk by my counsel's office and I look at those education code sections, and I think when the teacher shuts the door and is looking at these 25 or 30 kids, those 10 volumes of the education code are irrelevant. At the end of the day, it's the teacher in that classroom. That's where the creativity or non-creativity is, and the principal. And the closer you are, the more capacity for change, for being effective or being ineffective. But because the power now is so concentrated, we have more and more prescriptions, more and more thou shalt not. Now we've changed that. A measure that was passed last year, which is called the local funding formula, will actually we've stripped away most, but not all, of the state mandates, and we're giving local school districts the discretion to make their own decisions. Now we've set some accountability criteria that we'll judge them on, but we're not telling them, how to open the door or how big the blackboard or a lot of these things that the state has been telling people. And we're also doing something that's, I think, certainly unprecedented for California, but unusual for, I think, the rest of the country. A certain percentage of this money will be distributed based on how many kids come from families that don't speak English at home, how many are from homes where they're eligible for federal nutrition programs, which means they're poor, or how many are in foster homes. So you take those three factors, and the school district will get that funding. By the way, just as a point of note as to how the process works, a couple of weeks ago, there were hundreds of people before the state board arguing for more prescriptive regulations to essentially undo the local discretion. And we're now working through that process between what do we tell people, how do we hold them accountable for the extra money they get. And it is a problem because if you give people money and you don't tell them what to do with it, they're going to do something you might not like. But we have to work through that because there's another evil that if you have too much prescription, that doesn't work either. And I like to think of Montaigne's comment in his essay on experience, which I'm sure you've all read or will go out and read. Montaigne said that laws should be rare, and when they're necessary, should be very abstract. That's the very opposite of minute prescriptions, bills that are hundreds of pages long that go into so many details. However, Montaigne is not that well read in today's political circles, and he certainly isn't well followed. So I know you're going to hear a lot of issues about California and taxes and regulations, but the economy is growing faster than the nation as a whole. That's because we were down further, so we're coming back faster, but it's still happening. We're still a place which gets over 50% of the venture capital. We're still a place that gets 4 or 5 times more patents than any other state. And we are blessed with a spirit of adventure, creativity, and pioneering spirit. I think it's good that we talk a lot about innovation, but we have to remember where we came from and tradition. The older I get, the more important I think the past is. But I'm still thinking about the future. It was King Charles in France, King Carlos, who gave the order, occupy San Diego and Monterey. I think that was 1769. And Portola, Gaspar de Portola came out here, and Father Serra, and they marched up to Monterey. They got lost in the fog. Actually, Father Serra stayed back the first trip. And Portola went up there. He couldn't find Monterey. And the Spanish wanted that as a base. So he had to march all the way back. And way back wasn't, they had to eat, this is not so good at lunchtime, but they had to eat the mules. They didn't have any food. It was pretty bad. So they got back to San Diego. They got provisions from Baja California, and they marched back up. And that time, Father Serra came by boat. Gaspar de Portola went by foot, and they got up to Monterey, and they occupied it and became a Spanish base for their trips to the Philippines and what have you. Point is, these were pioneers, these were adventurers. They didn't know what they were going to get. And that's been happening ever since. No one expected the gold rush, but there's never been a stimulus program like the gold rush. Just take your pick and shovel, invite people from all over the world, and all of a sudden billions of dollars come out. It's an amazing stimulus program that took no bureaucracy. They had no rules, real outlaws at that time. Anyway, Mark Twain has written a lot about it, but it's not since then. Agriculture, oil, and we are a big oil state, by the way. Some people don't know that. California is a major producer of petroleum. And the movie industry and tourism and aerospace and the information age and biocom. This is still an incredible place that people come to. And as Mike was telling me, most of these patents are from immigrants. And so it's good that 25% of the people who are in California weren't born here. So we are assimilating lots of people, and we want to keep it that way. And that's why I think we've got to have an immigration reform bill, so when people come out here, we can welcome them instead of just having, well, anyway, it's pretty clear where we ought to be going on that. But I have a lot of optimism about the state. I mean, I would have never thought we could go from financial instability to stability and surplus, and we can do that. Now, it's not by ignoring our problems. We have deferred maintenance on our roads that is serious. We have unfunded and growing liabilities in our pension and retiree health, state, university, and local level. That's real. We have the challenge of climate change and how we do that, and California is the national leader on that, and it can be a great opportunity for jobs going forward. But I was down at the Biocom conference last week in San Diego. Just incredible what the human mind is able to produce. So we don't have the gold rush where you have to take your pick and shovel and take it out of the Sierras. We have something that you take out of the mind. And you not only take it out of one mine, but we collaborate in mines. And now it's worldwide. So this is an epicenter of change and optimism and I think forward progress. And the obstacles are real. And some of them are getting worse, not better. But it doesn't mean you have to shrink back and retreat to some ideological misconception. I look at the commentary, and it's in some ways kind of pathetic. You have the left commentary, you have the right commentary. But there ought to be the true commentary. What do we understand about where we are? What do we understand about what we need to do to go forward? And let's try to collaborate, not based on our partisan identities, but rather on our best thinking and what results and actual experience tells us. And that's pretty much the way I approach things. It's one of the things I enjoy most about being governor is when I show up at this office, I can remember, well, gee, I was in the same chair, not the exact same chair, but in the same room, the same place, 1975. What was I thinking then? And what was that? We had issues. We had health care. We had energy. We had roads. We had crime. And we have the same things today. So, but I see it. I see different things. Just a couple of days ago, I asked that the 33 wardens of our 33 prisons, when I was governor, we had 12. Now we got 33. Our prison population went up almost 500%. It's coming down now. And I talked to them for 5 hours. I interrogated them. I had each one stand up. What's going on in your prison? And we got issues, but we have some very enlightened, very dedicated people trying their best to make things a little better for their being there. And I'd like that to be the spirit of this gathering and all the coming together of so many people to live and to work and to enjoy their lives in California. It's a great gift. It's a gift that I feel very appreciative of, that I could grow up in this state, that my father was governor, watching him, and be able to come back, and then even to follow in my own footsteps 28 years later. That's very unusual. But it was possible because I started at 36. I was retired even before I hit the retirement age, which was 60. I got out of there at 44. But that gave me a little time to come back. And I tell you, it's better. Yes, there's some difficulties, but we have a lot of intelligence. We have tremendous resources. And if we just think clearly enough and we can find some ways to get out of our comfort zone, we can make it work. This state is still an example. It's a model in so many ways, and in some ways for things that are serious issues. But I just want you to know, as you hear about all the taxes and the regulations and the problems, I know this state. I've been studying it a long time. It's a pretty great place. We can make it better. And if you're a Democrat and you look out, you say, my God, we're not spending enough money. If you're a Republican, you say, oh my God, we're spending too much. You both might be wrong. We'll figure out a way to make it work. We always have. And we'll prove, as Abraham Lincoln did, that popular government is not an absurdity. It's a fabulous opportunity to give full vent to the human imagination. And that's exactly what we're doing in California. Thank you.